Corinthians chapter 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Continuing on the Love and Respect series that we've been doing. I did not put together a slideshow for you, so hopefully you can still pay attention. Nope, everyone's shutting down right now. No graphics, no pay attention. I did not have time to do that. I thought about it yesterday, but I ran out of time. So no real good excuse, but I did not do it. So we've been going through couple, the acronym couple, closeness, openness, understanding is what we did last week, and then today will be peacemaking. And for this acronym, it's for the husbands mostly, and our responsibility to love our wives as Christ loved the church. And these are just some practical things that our wives need from us as husbands that will help us stay on the energizing cycle. So the energizing cycle is the opposite of the crazy cycle, which I've heard some stories this morning of some, I won't say them out loud, or names. If you didn't make a noise, no one would even know it was you. But it's okay. We don't know it's you. No. The crazy cycle, which we all get on as married couples, where the primary, not only, but the primary need for wives is to be loved. And the primary need for husbands is to be respected. And when a husband loves his wife the way she needs to be loved, she'll be energized to show the respect that the husband needs. And when he feels respected and gets what he needs, he is energized to show love. And you get on this circle of good, and that's where we want to be. When things come up, and we'll talk today, we're going to talk about peacemaking, which we're actually going to probably talk more about the opposite of peacemaking, which is conflict. But when conflict arises, which it does, because we are human beings, when conflict arises, it's very easy to get on the crazy cycle where your wife doesn't feel loved by you. And so she shows disrespect, and you don't feel respected, and so you don't show love. And it's a merry-go-round that no one wants to be on. And the goal of understanding these things, and we're addressing it from the husband's ability to change things right now, is that when we do get on that crazy cycle or it starts to spin, recognizing it, seeing that it's happening, knowing that it's happening, and being the mature husband and wife to slow it down and stop it, to not allow it to just spin out of control, but understand that it's there and know how to change course and get back to the energizing cycle. That is the goal. So 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and we're just going to read the first 4 verses here. It says, "Now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. The wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband. And likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife." So we'll stop there for now. So you see this, and we're talking physical interaction and a physical relationship in a marriage. And we will touch on that, but the same principle applies to our entire relationship. So it's not just in this case where Paul is saying, husbands and wives, you're not your own anymore. You're one flesh, right? We talked about leave, cleave, weave, right? You're one flesh now. So you don't belong to you belong to him. And you don't belong to you belong to her. And it's not just the physical aspect of marriage that we're talking about here, although that does definitely apply. It's the mindset. It's the attitude of how you address your marriage and understanding, and it's a selflessness is what it is. If you just want to get down to it, it's getting away from being selfish, which we naturally are, very selfish. We always are selfish people. We want what we want, and that's where the crazy cycle comes from, because we aren't getting what we want or what we need, and so we get upset. So the whole idea of selfishness and understanding God is saying, you are not yours. You don't belong to you. You have to get away from that selfishness and be selfless and be giving to your spouse. And so when we talk about that with the whole entire relationship, peacemaking comes when we aren't always selfless. But being selfish, we have to have peacemaking because conflict comes. When there's a rift or conflict in our marriage, or, that sense of tension, right, where maybe things aren't being said, but you could just feel it, right? You could cut it with a knife. You could feel the tension that's there. And you and your wife are just not fully at peace with each other. Right? We've all been there. We've all been in those moments, in those times, and some of them have lasted a long time, right? There's maybe times where they have lasted days, where there's that tension and just things aren't right. Hopefully, the goal is to have those moments be smaller, right? Maybe it's just an hour, maybe it's just a conversation is all it takes to fix that. But we've all been there. But when we have that tension and we have that disconnect, really, that conflict, without the peace that comes from being together, that connection that we've been talking about the last few weeks is not felt, right? If there's conflict, if there's tension, your wife does not feel close to you, right? It's the opposite of that. And most of the time when there's tension, someone's not being open and completely honest, right? Usually, and there's not understanding. Obviously, if there's conflict and we're at odds, we're not understanding one another. So the things we want to have are absent when conflict is there. So as we've discussed the last 3 weeks, closeness, openness, and understanding, the wife is energized by those things, right? She feels loved by you when she feels connected to you as her husband. When she feels that you're completely open with her. You're a open window. Everything is in your heart. She knows. And when you're close to her physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, she feels loved. She feels understood. And when she feels understood, she feels loved. But when conflict comes, usually that's kind of torn away. And there's distance there. Problem is, conflict comes, right? It will come. It does come. You cannot prevent it. There is no way to have a marriage with zero conflict, unfortunately. It doesn't exist. There will always be conflict. So it's on us on how to, and as we're talking to the husbands today, it's on the husbands to understand when that conflict arises, when it comes, whether it's your fault or not. How do you slow that down? How do you change it quickly, right? How do you make that conflict go away? How do you resolve that conflict in a godly manner, in a quick way, so that you can get back to the relationship you want it to be? And every situation is going to be different. There's not like, okay, say this and make your head do that, and then it'll be fine. It'll just magically go away, right? It doesn't work that way. Every situation will be completely different. And this is where, when you're not in conflict, knowing your spouse will help you when conflict comes. Because the more open you are with your spouse, the closer you are to your spouse, the more you understand each other. When conflict comes, you as a couple can understand how to get through it quicker because you know each other and you know where you're coming from, and you can be a little selfless, and you can give that grace in those moments when the emotions build up and you don't want to give grace and you just want to tell them they're wrong and walk away. To get to the point where the conflict is resolved, it requires you to understand each other and working. And that's why being close and open and understanding is so important when it comes to conflict. So when conflict does come, you can work it out, right? It's doable. It's not. There's nothing that's insurmountable. Even the worst possible case scenario can be resolved by a husband and wife that have good intentions for each other and love God and want to be the wife and the husband they're supposed to be. The worst case scenario, it can be resolved if each person is willing to do their roles, willing to give grace, willing to be kind. It can be resolved. Now, we aren't necessarily going to talk about the worst case scenarios. We're probably mostly going to be talking about the day-to-day stuff that we all deal with day-to-day. But oftentimes when there is potential conflict, not always, but often, the wife feels it first. Because the wife is she understands and feels love from those things. And when those things are absent, she feels that. And she knows it and sees it. Where the husband can be completely oblivious to that he's in trouble, quote unquote, right? He may not even know that there's conflict, but she feels it. And that changes the dynamic. It brings that tension in. And as we've discussed before, when she feels that tension, when she feels that conflict there, no matter how strong or early it is in the moment, her natural reaction is to move close to you as her husband to resolve it. And we talked about this before. We have to understand that, men, and that she's not coming in to control. She's not coming in to fix you or to tell you you're doing something wrong. She senses conflict or tension, and her natural response is to come close to resolve. And instead of going, get away from me, but what are you trying to do? You have to understand that, and we talked about that in the previous weeks. She needs the resolution. I think I wrote resolution, which is not a word. It's inside of my mind. She needs the resolution so that your relationship can be at peace. That's what she wants. She wants peace in the relationship, right? And so when she comes to you, don't run. Not physically. I mean, don't run physically. Although maybe if you ran physically, maybe she'd laugh. Like if you just ran away out the room, she might laugh, and maybe that solves the conflict. Done. Probably not likely. But don't run from it emotionally, right? Don't run from the conversation. Don't refuse to make peace because you just don't want to deal, right? You can't, as a husband, you can't say, I don't have time for your emotional self right now, wife. I'm busy. Don't do that. You can't do that, right? Your wife wants to make peace because she wants your relationship to be good. And even if you don't feel the conflict, you're obligated, because you're her husband and love her and care for her and supposed to love her like Christ loves us, you're obligated to hear her out, see where she's at, see what she feels. And for a husband, we can feel, and we'll get to this a little bit more too, but you can feel that conflict might be a sign that you're wrong as a husband and your marriage is bad because there's conflict. And so sometimes we just say, it's not a big deal. We don't want to deal with it. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. Just drop it. But conflict's not a sign of a bad marriage, right? If you fight, if you argue, if you have heated discussions, whatever you want to call them, that doesn't mean your marriage is bad. Because, again, there is no marriage that does not have them. Pastor and Miss Aaron fight. I know. It's like, no, yeah, they do. Lisa and I fight. I've told you out loud fights that we've had, right? Like every marriage, that's more similar than you probably realize. You're like, well, you don't know him. You don't know the thing. Okay, he might be a little different, but the idea is pretty much the same. We're all on the same wavelength. We all make the same say the same stupid stuff. We all don't say the things we should say sometimes. And wives are the same too. We all are in the similar boat. So conflict exists. It doesn't mean that your marriage is bad when there's conflict. Go down to verse number 28 of chapter 7 here. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse number 28. We'll read 20, just verse 28, it's fine. Paul says, and if thou marry, thou hast not sinned, and if a virgin marry, she hath not sinned. Nevertheless, such shall have trouble in the flesh, but I spare you. I mean, Paul's like, if you get married, will be problems. But he's like, I'm not married, so we just won't go into it all. I'll spare you all the details right now. But just understand, there shall be trouble, right? You're two imperfect human beings that are trying to live selflessly and fight the urges of your carnality, which is selfishness and I'm more important than me and what I want. And so there will be trouble. There will be conflict. So having conflict doesn't mean your marriage is on the rocks. Doesn't mean your marriage, what have I done? I've made the wrong choice. No, it just means you're human beings and that you have to work through conflict. Just like when you're at work, there are conflicts at work. With your friends, the conflicts arise in friendships and extended families. It's part of human nature. So we have to understand that. We can't think, well, we're going through conflict. Our marriage is this is a bad deal. It's just miserable. That's not God's plan. God's plan for marriage is not misery. God's plan for marriage is peace and happiness and joy, fellowship, and lots of fun things. That's God's plan for our marriage. So in this case, what kind of trouble is he talking about? And if we were to go back to verse number 3 and 4, the reason he had to say, your body is not yours, wife, your body is not yours, husband, is because there were people at the church at Corinth there that thought restraining from marital relationships physically meant it was a sign of a good Christian. It meant if you abstained from the marriage relationship that you were a better Christian than other Christians were. And that was going through the church here at Corinth. And so Paul had to say, look, husbands and wives, you're not your own. Your wives, your body belongs to your husband. Husbands, your body belongs to your wife. And it's an idea of selflessness. Obviously, if that was going through the church, there's going to be some conflicts, I'm guessing. If husbands and wives are abstaining on purpose to be a good Christian and then just keeping it, there's going to be conflicts. There's going to be some tension in a lot of marriages there because God made it so that happens on purpose, like it's part of the marriage relationship. So obviously it had some conflicts that Paul had to write a letter about to point out. So he points out the fact, quit being selfish. You don't belong to you. Selflessness is essential in your marriage. Your spouse has power or control over that aspect of your marriage. Like the physical part of it specifically, your spouse has control over that aspect of your marriage. And I'm talking to each partner. right? Not you. You don't have control over it. She does. Not you. You don't have control over it. He does. That's how God intended for it to be. It's a selfless attitude, right? And obviously, that's how God wants it to be, and we'll be smart about it. And when it comes to other things, we got to be careful about how that goes. But I think you understand when you have, again, two couples, a husband and wife, that love God, love each other, have good intentions for one another. That's how it should be, and that's how it should go. But since you both have equal but different needs in that area and other areas of our marriage, conflict is going to come, right? Conflict will come from a result of the physical relationship. It will happen. Because our needs and wants are different, and our ability to fulfill each other is different, and we have to be selfless in that area to prevent that type of conflict from coming. But when the conflicts come, when we have those different needs, different things that we need in our relationship, physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, we have different needs and desires, these conflicts can be worked out, right? As partners, as I alluded to earlier. We just have to have that mentality, is that we are not independent entities within the relationship, right? The husband does not act independently from his wife, and the wife does not act independently from her husband, right? That has to be the mentality we look at our relationship with. Now, yes, there'll be times where, it's like, okay, put me on FaceTime as you go to the store, or put me on FaceTime as you get gas, so I have to see everything. Not saying that. We're all adults. We can handle ourselves on our own, but that goes back to our openness, right? There should be no secrets between the two of you. There should be not even secrets. There should be no quarantined off areas of your heart or your mind that your wife or husband is not privy to. That means dreams. You have dreams, you have goals. Maybe you're even scared to say some of the goals and dreams and visions you have for yourself because you're afraid you can't attain those things, and so you keep them to yourself. Openness with your relationship, selflessness, is you share those things with your spouse. The good things, the exciting things you're anticipating, your plans for the future, but also the things you're afraid of, right? The things that are troubling you, the areas you struggle in. And if it's a mental struggle, we all go through times of mental struggles, right? Where we're down, where we're depressed, when things just aren't going our way, where we struggle and we just don't know how to get out of it. We feel like, all right, I got to figure this out on my own, and we kind of bring it in. And we don't want to bring our husband down, or we don't want to bring our wife down, so we don't let her in on those things. No. So that's selfishness. That's a different form of it. We think we're protecting our spouse by not letting them in on all the things we're afraid of because we don't want them to be afraid too. But why are you carrying it all by yourself? If that's the case, you're probably not asking God to help you carry it either, would be my guess. Because if you're not willing to give it to another human being, you're probably definitely not willing to give it to God. So bring your husband or wife in on that. Right? They need to know. If you're struggling somewhere, your husband or your wife should be the first person to know that. They deserve to know that. And it's selfish to keep it in. Let them know the places that we're struggling. Husbands and wives do not act independently within the marriage. It's a team effort. It's a leave, cleave, weave. It's one flesh. You can't be one flesh if you got things that you just don't talk about. You can't be. You're fighting against yourself. You're shooting yourself in the foot. We are to give up our way for our spouse and work together and act together. So when conflicts arise, give in. Yeah, but they're wrong. Okay, when conflicts arise, give in. God says to act selflessly. He says, you are not yours. She belongs to you. He belongs to you. You are not your own. So when conflicts arise, give in. If the first instinct when conflicts arise is to prove your point, or to be right, or to make them give in, or to make them say they're sorry, that is, even if you're right, even if beyond a shadow of a doubt, you are correct in every aspect of it, you are the righteous party, give in. And that doesn't mean, well, fine, let's go to the bar and drink, I guess. It's not saying give in to sin. I'm saying give in when conflicts come where there's an impasse. And until someone gives, there's an impasse. Be the one to give. Be the one to give in, right? We are to give in our way for our spouse, to be selfless. When conflict comes and then you work together, it's not saying, okay, I give in, I lay down, walk all over me, whatever you want instead is fine. Now, there may be times where that is the case. There may be times where you're just like, okay, I'll give in, whatever you want, we'll do in some situations. But when conflicts come, give in enough to where you can resolve it. You can talk about it. It's not, okay, give in, I give up, fine, you win, and we're mad at each other because I gave in, I shouldn't have to give in. It's not over then. You didn't give in, and he didn't or she didn't win, right? It's still out there. So just giving in and rolling over doesn't resolve it. Giving in means, okay, let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Let's work it out. And then be willing to hear each other. I mean, it's any kind of conflict resolution in any kind of relationship, but especially a husband and wife relationship, you have to be willing to hear each other out. And we talked about this with understanding. You can't be thinking about your point while they give their point. That doesn't work well because you miss what they're saying. And we do that to each other. Of course we do. We probably do it to each other more than we do to our friends and other coworkers and things because we're comfortable with one another. Give in when that conflict comes. Work together to resolve it. Making peace when you go through that, and you know this, if you've been through conflict and you've worked it out, it makes your relationship stronger. It makes it deeper. It makes your love for each other deeper. When you get through that conflict, doesn't mean you're like, all right, let's find some new conflict so we can deepen this relationship more. No, there are other much easier ways to deepen the relationship without going through conflict. But when it comes and you come to a resolution and you work it out, you understand each other better. You know where each other are coming from even more now. So it gives you an opportunity to strengthen that relationship. That's why God puts trials in our lives in general. Bring us closer to Him. We don't want to go through trials. If we could choose, we would avoid them. But it strengthens our faith. It strengthens our dependence on Him. The relationship that you have with each other is similar in those areas. When those conflicts come, you can work through them, and that strengthens the relationship you have. Now, for us men, we have to learn how to say these two words. And technically 3 words, but it's I'm sorry. And that can be hard to say. And why is it so difficult for men to say I'm sorry? Or ladies, why is it so difficult for men to say I'm sorry and mean it? Right? We can use it as a Band-Aid and say I'm sorry, meaning I'm sorry, stop talking, is what it means. Fine, I'm sorry. Fine, I'm sorry. Whatever, I'm sorry. There's no heart there, right? It's just a word to say, stop talking, I'm done. I'm sorry, what else do you want me to say? I've said those words. They aren't very important. They're not very impactful. I'm sorry, what do you want me to say? Oh man, I feel loved, so loved, she says in that moment. Right? To a woman, the real I'm sorry, the heartfelt meaning I'm sorry is an increase of love because it's showing understanding from the husband. It's showing a willingness to be open and transparent and close and understanding. To a man, though, and wives, you have to think this way too. Again, we like to see with our pink and blue sunglasses and our pink and green. Yeah, pink and green earwax. No, pink and blue ears. Bad picture. We have to get over seeing things from our perspective only. So guys, when you say I'm sorry, it's her understanding, it's saying I love you. But understand also, wives, that sometimes when a man says I'm sorry, he's afraid to say it or hesitant to say it because he's afraid he will lose some moniker of respect. If he says I'm sorry, he feels as though he might be, when he gives in, he feels like he's giving in and he loses some of that honor that he has. He becomes vulnerable. And again, this is his mindset. Doesn't mean it's real. Doesn't mean that's what's happening. It might not even be that's what you're thinking. But for him, sometimes that can be the case. Especially if he has to say it, if he says it and he feels like he means it, but then in 5 more minutes, the same thing he said he's sorry for comes up again. And we've all been there. And I mean, but Mark, did you show me that? Yeah, that was this morning. There's a meme of a female ref for a football game. And it said, that so-and-so is going to be one of the first female refs for a football game. She's going to be throwing flags from an offense from 3 months ago. Right, and we laugh because, and it could be it could be offensive, but that's not how I am. And it's stereotypical that, and not always true, but often. And if a wife brings something up again, it's usually because she doesn't feel it's resolved. Husbands, that's why she's bringing it up again. But wives, if you have conflict, you have a conversation, and he says he's sorry, and you go through those conversations again, but then 10 minutes later, an hour and a half later, right before bed, you bring it up again, you have disrespected him in his mind, and in his perception, his blue. He's going to feel disrespect for that. Now, you in your mind might be saying, man, I feel like it's still there. I feel like we didn't actually resolve the whole situation. And so you feel like you have to revisit it. Don't wait to do that then. Take care of it in the moment. Because if you revisit it later, if you dredge it back up in 3 months, 2 years, whatever, say, I forgive you, but I never forget, right? Those types of things for a husband, eventually, if those things happen on a regular basis with all the conflicts, he'll stop saying, I'm sorry. Because it doesn't matter to him. It feels that way. Because he'll say sorry, and if it comes up again, I can't. What do I do? How do I say it again and make it mean something this time? And so he'll try. A good-natured, godly man will try to resolve it, and in his mind, what he thinks he's doing. Again, we can work on that, husbands, to make more than just "I'm sorry" be the words. It could be more to it. Right? There could be an explanation. There could be understanding of where she's at, right? Where you say, I understand where you're coming from. I understand how you feel this, and this. And because I made you feel that, I am sorry. That's more than just I'm sorry. You can make more into that conversation. But if it comes back up again, wives, eventually he'll just stop doing that. And then you've got more conflict to overcome to get back to the point where he feels like he can say it and it's believed. Right? Because if he feels like you don't believe him, you don't believe me anyway, so why would I keep doing it? That'll be his mentality and his thought process. Doesn't mean it's correct. Doesn't mean it's the right reaction. Husbands, you can't do that. If she brings it up again, you have to swallow your pride, not be disrespected again, because it only takes one person to stay off the crazy cycle. So if your wife struggles and she does not realize bringing it up again is disrespectful, then you've got to be the one that says, okay, she's not trying to be disrespectful, and have that conversation again. You might feel like your honor has been stripped, or she doesn't trust you, she doesn't believe you. Okay, overcome it. Be the man that is going to get you guys off the crazy cycle and have the conversation again. And then if wives, if you will try to be understanding and graceful, and husbands, you will also try to be understanding and graceful, you'll work it out way quicker than if neither one of you are. If you can't help but bring it up again because you don't feel it's resolved, and husbands, you can't help feel but disrespected, which you just start the crazy cycle again, you'd start doing that. It's going to take way longer to get back there. And the goal is to be at peace, right? The goal is to have your relationship close and at peace. So in the case, understand, husbands, that she just may not feel the issue is resolved, right? I know to you it'll feel like a violation of your honor, your code of honor, but that's not what she's trying to do. She's not intentionally trying to violate your honor. She just needs resolution. She doesn't feel it's there. So step up, express yourself humbly. And if you do this the first time, it may prevent the second time from being brought up. If we as men will humbly express our sorrow for our actions and talk about them, we'll get to our wife's heart even quicker. Right? Proverbs 15:1, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Right? So guys, if you at the first time you work on your apology or your understanding of why, even if you don't feel like you did wrong per se, but just your understanding of why she feels the way she feels, and that you're there with her, you get it, and you're sorry for how maybe you contributed to those emotions and to those feelings, and be willing to humble yourself and accept your responsibility for it, you'll show a loving demeanor, and loving demeanor shown during any conflict brings softness even quicker. Right? Way quicker than poking a fire, right? Poking it is going to stoke it, and we don't want to do that. We want the soft response. So, but what if, as a husband, you keep loving and giving in, but still feel disrespected? What if you're trying to do everything you're supposed to do? You love, you give in, you say you're sorry, and it still keeps coming up over and over and over again. Because, sorry, wives, we've all been there. And if we're honest with ourselves, I think, wives, you would understand we've all been there. Where you seem like you're talking about the same thing in circles for way too long, and you're getting nowhere, right, in that specific conversation. So as a man, if you feel like that's where it's going, I think you have an opportunity in that moment to say humbly, I'm seeking to resolve the conflict, but I'm feeling disrespected. What am I saying to you that feels unloving? Or like, what? Okay, can I write that down? No, just hold out your teeny weeny beady bearded guy or your heart and say, that's why I gave those to you. And that was the idea, is there will be times where conflict is happening and you're just stuck. And so you might have to stop and say, okay, I feel disrespected by what you're saying, by the attitude you're having toward it. And not, I feel desperate. No. Calmly, humbly, I feel disrespected by what you're saying here. It's not saying, so fix it. It's saying, what am I saying that you feel is unloving? Allow her to tell you why she's responding the way she's responding. Right? Because that's the crazy cycle. Disrespect, unloving. Disrespectful, unloving. So again, it only takes one. Wives, you can be the one to stop it too, but we're talking to the men today, so that's where we're going there. So guys, you stop. You tell her honestly that you feel disrespected. What she's saying is making you feel that way. But then say, but what is it that I'm doing that's making you feel unloving? And she'll tell you. And the wives, if he comes to you that way, tell him. And if you're like, I don't know. Okay. Then we're one step closer to understanding where we're going and resolving that conflict. So it's just, again, it goes back to being open with each other and honest. And sometimes it literally takes, it feels weird. I tell you, it feels weird at home because I teach it. I get up here to teach it. And then, she said sometimes, she goes, I feel like you're teaching to me right now. And I'm just using what I have learned and what is being suggested, but it works. Because I can say, I feel disrespected. And that stops the cycle. Like it's spinning, right? We're back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And all it takes is one person to say, I feel disrespected by what you just said. And although she may not feel she's being disrespectful, that will stop the cycle dead in its tracks and we'll have an opportunity to work on it. It can be frustrating because you feel like you're getting teaching thrown in your face at home. But she's done that too. So I feel unloved. I feel unloved. Or she won't even say it. She'll just be like, unloved. But it stops. It stops it because I know what she's saying. I understand where she's coming from. I know where her head is now. And we can focus on what's being done. And we can talk it out civilly. And it stops the crazy cycle. And it's funny. It seems silly. But it's real. That actually really happens. I won't say weekly, but anytime that happens, we attempt to take that path now. And that's why I say when I read through this book and I'm teaching it last time, it changed our marriage. If only this part would not only, but if only it changed this part, man, it lessens the tension, the amount of time that it lasts, the cold shoulders, the falling asleep without talking to each other, back to back, right? And just the awkward silence. It fixes those things if we're just open with each other and say it out loud and have those conversations. And a good-willed woman will tend to respond to those reasonable, honest requests, right? You can make peace when you don't blame her, but instead address your part and be willing to talk about it, right? James 5:16 says, confess your faults one to another. When you're wrong, say you're sorry, apologize, ask for forgiveness, right? Ultimately, it brings peace and it keeps us on the energizing cycle, and that's our desires, to be on the energizing cycle. And it can be difficult. Conflicts are difficult because our emotions get involved, our sense of honor gets involved, our feelings of being unloved gets involved, and questioning whether he loves you as much as you love him. All those things get rolled up in conflict, and so it can be difficult to go through those things, but it's always worth it when you do. Always worth it when you do. All right, couple things here. She feels at peace when, guys, this is for you, when you let her vent her frustrations and hurt. Right? Who yells again? I keep going to this. Who else you want her to call? You want her to call her mom? No, you want her to talk to you. You want her to call her mom sometimes, but you don't want her to call her mom about you. Right? You want her to talk to you about you. Don't get angry and close her off. Right? When conflict comes up, guys, don't shut her out. Don't get so mad that you're done with the conversation and walk away. You can't. You're just spinning it faster. So don't get angry and close her off. Admit when you're wrong and ask forgiveness. And again, ladies, when you ask forgiveness, be willing to forgive. And not the I'll forgive, but I will never forget, right? No, forgive, like let it go, forgive. Like it's gone. Like when you actually forgive, it means it no longer exists in your mind. That's what forgiveness is. It's gone. It doesn't get brought back up because you've let it go and forgiven. Don't allow conflicts to get into let's just drop it or let's just forget it. Never do that. Never get to the point where it's like, we're just not going to deal with it. Because it'll come up again later, and with gusto. It'll be even more so. Forgive her for any wrong she confesses. right? I know a lot of times as husbands it can feel like you're the one that's always in the wrong. You're the one that's always making mistakes and trying to fix and mend. But, when she messes up sometimes, be willing to forgive her. Don't hold it over her head. Be like, yes, finally, she did it wrong. Oh, date it, stamp it, hold it over her head forever. No, forgive. Same way. It's no different. Forgive, and that means let it go. Never bring it up again. And never nurse bitterness. Men, and that's for you. We talked about that a week or two ago, not being bitter against your wife. Never nurse bitterness. That's part of the openness. And always, always, always reassure her of your love. When you go through conflict, she's going to question the love that you have. She's not really. She knows you love her, but she needs reassurance of it from you. So when conflicts are resolved and they're over, find ways to reassure her of your love. Physically, emotionally, whatever you need to do, the ways that she understands it, that's the time, because the conflict's over. Drop all the pride, humility, all that's there, and you reassure her that your relationship is solid. All right.